March 19th, 9:45 a.m. The APC's steady hum was the only constant in the sea of tension enveloping us. The survivors we just rescued sat in silence, their faces reflecting a mixture of relief and fear. The baby, Ellie, cooed softly in Claire's arms, the sound almost alien against the backdrop of our grim reality. Maria was cleaning her rifle with meticulous precision, her hands steady but her eyes darting to the viewport every few moments. Davis sat beside her, checking his carbine for any sign of malfunction. Zoe, the young archer, perched near the back hatch, fletching an arrow with deft movements. Her quiet determination was striking, a child forced to grow up too soon. Dr. Green broke the silence. "We need to talk about what's happening out there." Her voice, though firm, carried a note of unease. "We already know what's happening," Maria snapped, her tone sharp. "The world's gone to hell, and we're all that's left." "It's more than that," Green countered, her eyes locking on Maria. "The infected are changing, adapting. Did you see the way they coordinated back there?" "Coordinated?" Davis asked, leaning forward. "They're mindless animals." "Not anymore," Green replied, her voice dropping to a whisper. "At the CDC, we saw evidence of higher brain activity in some specimens. They're learning from us. They're working together." The group fell silent, the weight of her words sinking in. Even Price, who rarely showed emotion, looked uneasy. "So what?" Tucker said, breaking the tension. "We'll just have to fight harder." "It's not that simple," Green said. "If they continue to evolve, they could outthink us, outmaneuver us. Survival will get even harder." "Then we'll adapt," Price said firmly. Her voice carried an edge of finality that ended the discussion. 10:15 a.m. The convoy slowed as the road ahead narrowed, flanked by dense trees on either side. The faint sounds of movement filtered through the air, putting everyone on edge. "We've got something," the driver announced, his voice tense. "Movement in the trees." Price signaled for the APC to stop, and the group quickly armed themselves. I grabbed my Halligan tool, the familiar weight bringing a strange sense of comfort. "Stay sharp," Price said, her rifle at the ready. "Tucker, Ash, with me. Maria, Davis, watch the rear. Green, keep the others inside." We stepped out of the APC, the cold air biting against our skin. The forest was alive with subtle sounds, rustling leaves, snapping twigs, but nothing moved. "I don't like this," Tucker muttered, scanning the tree line. "Feels like a setup." Price raised her hand, signaling for silence. We advanced slowly, every step measured. The faint smell of decay grew stronger, mingling with the earthy scent of the forest. Then we saw them. A group of infected stood motionless among the trees, their heads cocked at unnatural angles as if listening. They didn't charge, didn't snarl. They just watched. "What the hell are they doing?" I whispered. "They're waiting." Green's voice crackled over the comms. She was watching through the APC's external cameras. "This is new." "They're studying us," Price said, her voice low. "Everyone, fall back." As we retreated, one of the infected let out a guttural sound, and the others began to move. They advanced slowly at first, their steps eerily coordinated. Then, like a switch had been flipped, they charged. "Go, go, go!" Price yelled. We sprinted back to the APC, the infected hot on our heels. Maria and Davis opened fire from the hatch, their shots precise but not enough to slow the horde. Zoe joined in, her arrows finding their marks with uncanny accuracy. I reached the APC and hauled myself inside, pulling Tucker in after me. Price was the last to climb in, slamming the hatch shut as the driver floored the accelerator. The APC roared to life, barreling through the infected. Inside, everyone was silent, their breaths ragged. The pounding of the infected on the APC's sides grew fainter as we sped away. "They were testing us," Green said, breaking the silence. "They're learning our tactics." "Then we'll change them," Price said, her jaw set. "We'll make it so they can't predict us." 10:45 a.m. The APC reached a clearing, and the dense forest gave way to an abandoned rest stop. The battered building stood like a forgotten relic of normalcy, its faded signs advertising hot coffee and clean restrooms. It felt like a trap, but we needed a moment to regroup. "We're stopping here," Price announced. "Driver, perimeter check." The engine growled to a stop. The driver engaged the mounted gun and scanned the area while the rest of us disembarked. The air felt heavy, a palpable sense of dread hanging over us. "Davis, Maria, cover the entrance," Price ordered. "Tucker, Ash, check the building. Green, Zoe, stay with the APC." Tucker and I moved cautiously toward the rest stop, our weapons raised. The glass door was shattered, jagged edges catching the sunlight. Inside, the space was eerily intact, as though the world hadn't fallen apart. Tables and chairs were overturned, but the shelves still held dusty bags of chips and candy bars. "Clear so far," Tucker said, sweeping his shotgun across the room. "Let's keep it that way," I replied, stepping over debris. In the corner, a faint noise caught my attention. A low, wheezing sound. I raised my Halligan tool, signaling Tucker to cover me. As I approached, I saw it. A man slumped against the wall, his face pale and drenched in sweat. He wasn't infected, but he was close. "Help me," he rasped, his voice barely audible. Tucker moved in, his shotgun still trained on the man. "Are you bitten?" The man shook his head weakly. "No. Sick. Just sick." "We need Green," I said, motioning to the APC. "Stay here and watch him." I sprinted back to the vehicle and found Green explaining something to Zoe about the infected's behavior. "We've got someone inside," I said. "He's not infected, but he's in bad shape." Green grabbed her medical kit without hesitation. "Show me." Back inside, the man's condition had worsened. Green knelt beside him, her hands moving quickly as she checked his vitals. "Dehydrated. Feverish. Could be anything," she muttered. "We need to move him." "Move him where?" Tucker asked. "Zone Echo's still an hour away." "If we leave him, he'll die," Green snapped. "And if he has answers about what's happening, we can't afford to lose him." Price's voice crackled over the comms. "Status?" "We've got a survivor," I replied. "He's in bad shape." "Bring him out," Price ordered. "But keep your eyes open. This could be a trap." Tucker and I carried the man to the APC, his weight surprisingly light. As we loaded him inside, Green continued her assessment. "He's stable for now, but we need to get to a proper facility," she said. "Let's hope Zone Echo is still standing," Price muttered, signaling for everyone to mount up. The APC roared back to life, its tires kicking up dust as we sped away from the rest stop. Inside, the tension was thicker than ever. The infected were adapting, survivors were growing scarcer, and now we carried another unknown variable. For the first time, I felt the weight of hopelessness pressing against me. The world was changing faster than we could keep up, and I wasn't sure how much longer we could stay ahead of it. The man stirred weakly, his voice a rasp. They're not like before," he whispered. Green leaned in. "What do you mean?" His bloodshot eyes opened slightly. "They're planning. They have leaders." A chill ran through the cabin. Green's face paled as she locked eyes with Price. The implications were clear. This was far worse than any of us had imagined. The survivors sat in tense silence as the APC sped on. Zoe, usually so focused, clutched her bow tightly, her eyes scanning every passing shadow. Maria, visibly agitated, muttered under her breath. "Leaders?" Maria finally snapped. "What's next? Are they going to start laying traps?" Green turned, her expression grim. "It's not impossible. If they're organizing, it means they're learning. And if they're learning, they're becoming something else entirely." Price's voice cut through the tension. "We don't have time to speculate. Zone Echo is our priority. If it's operational, we'll regroup there and figure out our next move." The man on the stretcher coughed violently, a hacking sound that made everyone flinch. Green moved to his side, checking his vitals again. "Hold on," she said softly. "We're almost there." The APC lurched suddenly as the driver swerved to avoid debris. Everyone grabbed for support, the jolt snapping us out of our thoughts. Through the viewport, I saw the source of the disruption, a wrecked convoy blocking the road. Burned-out vehicles and abandoned supply crates littered the area. "Driver, halt!" Price commanded. "Everyone, gear up." We disembarked cautiously, weapons at the ready. The scene was eerily quiet, the air thick with the smell of burnt rubber and charred flesh. It was clear this convoy had been ambushed. The question was, by what? Davis crouched by a damaged Humvee, examining the tracks in the dirt. "These aren't from infected," he said, his tone grim. "Human footprints. And they're fresh." "Raiders," Maria spat. "Perfect." Zoe knocked an arrow, her small frame tense with anticipation. "If they're still here, they'll hear us coming." "Stay close," Price ordered. "We clear the area and move on. No unnecessary risks." As we moved through the wreckage, the tension grew. Every shadow seemed to shift, every sound amplified. Then, from the trees, a voice called out, "Drop your weapons, and we'll let you live." Dozens of figures emerged, rifles and makeshift weapons aimed at us. Raiders. Their leader, a burly man with a scar across his face, stepped forward, a cruel smile spreading across his lips. Price raised her weapon, her voice steady. "Not happening." The standoff was electric, every second stretching into eternity. The odds were against us, but surrender wasn't an option. Not with the infected adapting and every moment outside safety a gamble. The man on the stretcher groaned loudly, drawing the raiders' attention. Their leader's smile widened. Well, looks like you've got yourself a burden. Hand him over, and we might just let you walk away." Price's response was immediate. "Over my dead body." The forest held its breath, and then chaos erupted. March 19th, 11:15 a.m. The air was thick with tension, every breath feeling heavier as we moved through the dense forest. The APC's hum was the only sound breaking the oppressive silence, but it wasn't comforting. We all knew something was coming. The forest had that eerie stillness, the kind where everything alive had gone silent for a reason. "Eyes up," Price muttered from the front. Her grip tightened on her rifle as her eyes scanned the tree line. Even her normally composed demeanor seemed strained. Tucker and I exchanged a glance. He was tense, his shotgun already half raised. A single bird squawked and took off from the canopy, and I felt the hair on my arms stand up. Something was watching us. I could feel it. Zoe shifted nervously beside me, her hand resting on her bowstring. Maria and Davis were at the rear of the group, their weapons raised but their faces grim. Then, it happened. A shot rang out, splitting the silence. Price fired, her target dropping before I could even see where the attack had come from. The forest erupted into chaos. Gunfire and shouts filled the air as raiders swarmed from the trees, their ragged forms blending with the shadows. "Get to cover," Price barked, her voice cutting through the mayhem. I dove behind a burned-out Humvee, my heart pounding in my chest. Tucker slid in beside me, his shotgun at the ready. Zoe and Maria ducked behind a pile of crates, arrows and rifle fire answering the raiders' barrage. Davis was crouched near the APC, his carbine spitting bullets with practiced precision. Green stayed inside, tending to the injured man. Her pale face appeared briefly at the APC's rear hatch, her voice rising above the gunfire. "Hold them off. He's crashing. Stay with him." I shouted back. "We've got this." But did we? The raiders outnumbered us, and their relentless fire pinned us down. The sharp metallic scent of gunpowder mixed with the acrid stench of smoke and blood, choking the air. "They're flanking left," Davis called, his carbine shifting to cover the advancing group. "Zoe, with me," Maria commanded, breaking from her position. The young archer followed, her small frame darting between cover as she let loose arrow after arrow. Maria laid down suppressive fire, forcing the raiders to scatter. "Driver, give us support," Price yelled. The APC's mounted gun roared to life, its heavy rounds ripping through the trees and sending raiders diving for cover. It bought us precious seconds, but the tide was far from turning. 11:30 a.m. A raider's grenade arced through the air, landing perilously close to the APC. "Grenade!" Tucker bellowed. Price lunged, kicking the explosive away just before it detonated. The blast sent dirt and debris flying, but the APC remained unscathed. Price staggered, a thin line of blood trailing from her forehead, but she was already raising her rifle again. "They're not stopping," Tucker muttered, his shotgun booming as he took down an approaching raider. "We need to turn the tables," I said, gripping my Halligan tool tightly. My mind raced, searching for an opening. Then I saw it. One of the raiders, likely their explosives expert, was crouched by a supply crate, fumbling with another grenade. If I could reach him— "Cover me," I said, not waiting for a reply. I broke from cover, sprinting toward the raider. Bullets tore through the air around me, one grazing my shoulder. Pain flared, but I didn't stop. The raider looked up too late. I swung the Halligan tool with all my strength, the blunt end connecting with his head. He crumpled, the grenade slipping from his grasp. "Ash, move!" Tucker yelled. I dove back as the grenade exploded, taking out a cluster of raiders nearby. The shockwave knocked me flat, the world spinning for a moment before I scrambled back to cover. "Nice one," Tucker said, grinning despite the chaos. 11:45 a.m. The raiders began to falter, their numbers thinning. The APC's gunfire, combined with our counterattacks, was taking its toll. Their leader shouted orders, his voice desperate. "Fall back. Regroup." But Price wasn't about to let them escape. "Maria, Zoe, cut them off." Maria and Zoe moved swiftly, flanking the retreating raiders. Zoe's arrows flew true, striking targets with lethal precision. Maria's rifle barked, each shot purposeful and devastating. The remaining raiders scattered into the forest, their retreat a chaotic mess. "Hold fire," Price ordered, her voice sharp. "Let them go. We've got bigger problems." The silence that followed was deafening. Smoke hung in the air, and the ground was littered with bodies and spent casings. My ears rang, and my hands shook as the adrenaline ebbed. 12 p.m. Back at the APC, Green emerged, her hands stained with blood. "He's stable for now," she said, her voice exhausted. "But he needs proper care." "Zone Echo," Price said. "We move now." Davis and Tucker began loading supplies while Maria and Zoe kept watch. I leaned against the APC, my shoulder throbbing from the graze. Price approached, her face set in its usual stoic mask. "You did good out there," she said quietly. I nodded, too drained to respond. The weight of what we just survived settled over me. The infected were evolving. Raiders were becoming bolder. And every day, our chances of survival seemed to shrink. As the APC rumbled back to life, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Whatever lay ahead at Zone Echo, it had to be better than this. Because if it wasn't, we were already living on borrowed time. 12:30 p.m. The road stretched out before us, a desolate ribbon cutting through the remains of the old world. Silence filled the APC, save for the hum of its engine and the occasional cough from our injured passenger. Everyone was lost in their own thoughts, the weight of our recent battle hanging heavy in the air. Zoe sat near the hatch, her bow resting across her lap. She was fletching another arrow, her hands moving with practiced ease, but her eyes betrayed her unease. Maria sat beside her, disassembling her rifle for cleaning. Her movements were sharp and precise, frustration visible in every gesture. "They weren't just scavengers," Maria muttered finally. "Those raiders were too organized, too well-armed. They were waiting for someone like us," Davis added. "Ambushes like that don't happen by chance." "They knew we'd stop at the wreck," I said, the realization sinking in. "They're getting smarter too." Green glanced up from tending the injured man. "If they're collaborating with infected or learning from them, it could explain their tactics." "Collaboration?" Tucker scoffed. "You think those brainless monsters are working with humans now?" "Not willingly," Green replied. "But if the infected are evolving, there's no telling what they're capable of." Price remained silent, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Her fingers tapped a steady rhythm against her rifle, a habit I'd come to recognize as a sign she was deep in thought. Finally, she spoke. "Zone Echo's priority one," she said firmly. "If it's intact, we regroup. If not, we adapt. Like we always do." Her words were meant to inspire, but they did little to ease the knot of fear tightening in my chest. The world wasn't just falling apart. It was reshaping itself into something unrecognizable, and we were running out of time to find our place in it. 1 p.m. The landscape began to change as we neared Zone Echo. The barren roads gave way to fortified checkpoints and hastily constructed barricades. Signs of life became more apparent. Vehicles lined up along the roadside, tents pitched in clusters, and watchtowers manned by armed guards. The sight of the enclave brought a flicker of hope, but it was short-lived. As we approached the gates, it became clear that Zone Echo was far from the safe haven we'd imagined. The guards were on edge, their weapons trained on us as the APC rolled to a stop. "Identify yourselves," one of them shouted, his voice sharp with authority. Price stepped out first, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Captain Emma Price, formerly U.S. Army. We've got wounded and critical intel." The guard hesitated, his eyes scanning our battered group. After a tense moment, he nodded. "Welcome to Zone Echo. But if you're lying about that intel, you won't make it past the gates." As the gates creaked open, I couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and dread. Zone Echo was supposed to be our salvation, but what if it was just another battle waiting to happen?